Hello, everybody, and welcome to a discussion, a brief lecture on Chapter 2, our Psychological Research chapter, Research in Psychology chapter. So take a moment, imagine a world where we could fully understand the complexities of the human mind. It would be like a world where we could predict behavior, understand emotions, and address mental health challenges with precision. Well, that's the goal of psychological research. So, in this lesson, we'll be laying groundwork for our exploration of the scientific methods used to study human behavior. In the first section, we'll discuss the importance of psychological research. We'll explore why understanding human behavior is crucial for addressing societal challenges, improving well being, and advancing knowledge. Next, we'll introduce various research methodologies in psychology. In this section, we'll cover a wide range of technologies and techniques, including experiments, surveys, case studies, correlations, and so on. This will highlight strengths and weaknesses of the different methods and suggest when they should be used. And finally, we'll address the critical issue of ethics and reporting in psychological research. This will allow us to explore the ethical guidelines that we must follow as researchers to protect participants and ensure the integrity of our work. We'll also discuss the importance of accurate and transparent reporting of research findings. Ideally, by the end of this lecture, you should have a solid understanding of the foundations of psychological research, which will serve as a valuable framework for the rest of our course. So here we are, part one, the importance of psychological research. So let's go through a few essentially questions that are either myths or truths. And so as we go through them, jot down your answer and feel free to share with me if you'd like or in your module one reflection. True or false? Humans use on average 10% of their brains. If you said false, then you're correct. Humans use their entire brains. Brain imaging techniques show widespread activation across different regions, and brain plasticity allows adaptation and learning. True or false? It takes exactly 21 days to form a habit. That is also false because research suggests forming habits actually depends on mental links between situations and the actions and responses. That refers to the dispositions of a person. So habits compete with other impulses, whether it's intentions or emotions, to influence behavior. And so it varies person to person, essentially. Left brain people are typically more verbal, analytical, orderly, and better at reading, writing, computations, while right brain people are more visual, intuitive, and creative. This is also false. And while certain brain functions are lateralized, both hemispheres work together for most tasks. Individual differences are more complex than a strict left-right division. True or false, research shows that increased sugar intake in children causes hyperactivity. This is also false. The sugar rush myth lacks scientific support, and studies show no consistent link between sugar intake and hyperactivity in children. Other factors like excitement, context, and parental expectations may contribute. And another key word that you should note is that I said causes hyperactivity, didn't say associate with, so keep that in mind. And finally, does following one's daily horoscope does it mean that you might have higher rates of subjective well-being, which means basically happiness? That answer is also false, because following one's daily horoscope has not been scientifically linked to higher rates of subjective well-being. Now, horoscopes can be entertaining, but their accuracy and impact on well-being remains questionable and contentious, depending on who you ask. But our understanding of human behavior has been shaped by countless myths and misconceptions. And these myths, as you just learned, often persist despite lack of scientific evidence. Psychological science, however, offers a rigorous and evidence-based approach to understanding human behavior. So by examining the underlying mechanisms and processes involved, Psychological research allows us to debunk these myths and replace them with more accurate and nuanced understandings of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And because this one is always such a hot topic one and usually shocks students the most, I pulled a clip here from the SciShow Psych, basically doing a deep dive into the debunking of this myth.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating.
It's a notion that's been propagated by movies, magazines, and motivational speakers, and repeated by well-meaning folks and shysters alike. They tell you that you're only using 10% of your brain. If you're only able to access a fraction of your brain power, just imagine what you could do if you tapped into all that unused potential. Read other people's thoughts, play the stock market, crush cans with your mind, and levitate. Well, not to rain on your brain parade, but that 10% stuff is so far off that it would be laughable if it weren't so widespread, and I kinda can't believe I'm still talking about it. So like many myths, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where it began. There's no definitive source, though some have linked it back to American psychologist William James and even Albert Einstein, who both suggested in so many words that we were only using part of our mental potential. But the fact is, we use pretty much every part of our brains. A lot of it is active most of the time, whether you're reading a book or listening to music or walking around town or even sleeping. How can we be so sure? Well, for one thing, neuroimaging techniques like PET scans and MRIs actually let us see the brain in action. These images show us that nearly every region of the brain lights up during even simple tasks like walking and talking. While we don't use all of our brain at once, just like we don't engage every single muscle at the same time, those scans prove that over the course of any given day, you use just about all of your brain. It also stands to reason that if 90% of your brain was useless, you could remove large portions of it, as you might an appendix or tonsil, and carry on as usual. Brain damage and disease wouldn't be as much of a concern if only 10% of the organ was actually functional. But in reality, there isn't a single area of the brain that can be damaged or diseased without resulting in some kind of physical or mental consequence, small or big. You may have heard of the case of Phineas Gage, the 19th century railroad worker who wound up with a spike through his head because of an accident. It didn't actually stay in his head, it went all the way through, and then kept going for quite a while. It didn't kill him, somewhat surprisingly, and he still had his memories and his skills, but many of his friends reported that he had changed personalities. Now, we don't actually know a ton about Gage, because a lot of people used him to try and prove a lot of different points over the years, but there's little doubt that you can have a rod go through your brain and not have some things messed with. Then there's Clive Wearing, the British pianist who contracted a viral infection that destroyed his hippocampus, the part of the brain that controls the storage of memories. As a result, he's no longer able to recognize anyone but his wife, and he can't retain a memory for more than 30 seconds at a time. Every part of your brain has a function, and you need it in order to keep being you. And finally, we know that our brains are working all the time because we have to constantly feed them. Literally. The average human brain accounts for about 3% of a person's body weight, but it demands at least 20% of the body's energy to keep all those neurons firing. We're talking hundreds of food calories every day just so your brain can remind your heart to beat, or help you solve for X, or remember where you left your phone. Our constant need for food, especially foods rich in fats and sugars, has a lot to do with our brains, and it wouldn't make much evolutionary sense for us to expend so much energy feeding a useless, wet lump. So in the end, while telekinesis would be pretty awesome, our brains are already capable of truly incredible things. In fact, if anything, we only understand a fraction of what's really going on up there, so instead of insulting its function, be thankful for all that your brain does, which is more than you know. Thanks for watching this SciShow Dose. If you'd like to help us keep informing people of when they're wrong, you can go to subbable.com/scishow and become a...
So, question, why is psychological science important? Well, as we just introduced, it allows us to debunk pervasive myths based on social behavior. Throughout history, human understanding has evolved dramatically. At one point, people believed the earth was flat, and mental illnesses were attributed to possession. These misconceptions highlight the importance of relying on evidence to support our claims. We also look at evidence-based understanding as it's crucial for making informed decisions and developing effective interventions. In essence, for validating claims and preventing false beliefs, research allows us to separate fact from fiction and build a more accurate understanding of human behavior. Psychological research is a cornerstone of modern science. It's grounded in empirical evidence, meaning it's based on observable, repeatable facts. Unlike mere intuition or assumptions, research provides concrete proof of and supports our findings. In psychology, the science relies heavily on research. So without it, we'd be limited to guesswork and speculation. Research allows us to dive deeper into human behavior, test theories, and to validate understanding. So the next time you encounter a claim about human behavior, remember the power of research. It's what helps separate fact from fiction and build a more accurate understanding of the human mind. So as we said, psychological research is incredibly necessary for the critical thinker and problem solver. The theory of the post-truth world is a relatively new concept, but it has already had a significant impact on psychological research. We as psychologists are interested in understanding how people process information and make decisions, and the post-truth world has made this task even more challenging. So the rise of the post-truth era has highlighted the fragility of human cognition and susceptibility of individuals to misinformation and manipulation. This phenomenon occurs when many people's emotions and personal beliefs tend to override acceptance of objective facts. So, in a post truth world, people are more likely to believe information that aligns with their existing beliefs, even if that information is false. They're also more likely to be influenced by emotional appeals and by people they trust rather than by objective facts. And this can make it quite difficult to have rational public discourse and to make informed decisions. So, some of the key psychological factors contributing to this spread of misinformation include flawed thoughts, because our mind's not infallible. Cognitive biases and heuristics can lead to errors in judgment and decision making. And let's not forget fake news, because the proliferation of false or misleading information online has made it increasingly difficult to distinguish fact from fiction. So I ask, how strong is our mind really? Repeated exposure to a statement, even if it's false, can increase its perceived truthfulness and acceptance. And availability of powerful examples also, because vivid or memorable examples can exert a strong influence on our beliefs, even if they're not representative of the broader reality. And as we appreciate it, social media platforms can reinforce group identities and create echo chambers where individuals are exposed to only information that confirms their existing beliefs. But as social scientists and researchers, we have a responsibility to ask and answer questions and to follow the scientific method to get valid, reliable answers. Thank you for tuning in to this part one. Please be sure to pick back up with part two as we look at approaches to research